Hello, Michelle here, and we are one step closer to our art project. So before we get started, we need to understand the art process or technique that we're going to be using for our project. And I want you guys to go ahead and look at this painting for me, and I want you to determine which mountain is furthest away from us. Okay, and now I'm sure that you've determined which mountain is furthest away. How are you able to determine that this mountain is farther away than the other mountains? Okay, and now that we've had a few moments, I'll go ahead and point out which mountain is furthest away from us. So you could say any of the snowy mountains in the background are furthest away. And the reason that we're able to understand this, which you might have thought to yourself, is a few things, which we're going to talk about today. Some things that some students pointed out in class, even before knowing, which was really awesome, was that the lighting is different. You can't see as much detail on these mountains. And also, you can't fully see the mountains because other things are covering them up. And that is how we understand that these mountains are further away in comparison to another. I know it seems kind of silly, but it is interesting to see your guys' prior knowledge and understand that you guys know this without knowing it yet. And then I wanted to go ahead and point out this one as well. A lot of students were able to determine which mountain was furthest away by describing that the mountain in the middle looks like it's fading away. We can't see as much detail with this mountain, and ultimately it just blends in with the backgrounds. And I went ahead and pointed it out for us which mountain was furthest away. And what this is called is atmospheric perspective, which is really common in romantic paintings, which is why we're learning about it. And this is a technique, and it's creating depth by changing or modifying the tone or hue, which is exactly what we did last week in class with one color using our monochromatic color scheme. So you can only imagine that we're going to connect that to our painting. And so I'm going to go ahead and break this down in some simpler ways. So one way that atmospheric perspective works is that tinting increases with distance. So you can see here, these buildings, if we were up close to them, would look a lot different, and they'd probably be darker in different colors. But because they're so far away from us, not only do they look smaller than they appear, but also they're blending in with the sky because of atmospheric perspective. And then here, I think this is an excellent example of how color changes. So saturation is a property of color. And notice, as the mountains are closer to us, there's more saturation and we can see more of the color. But as they go further away, as you can see here, they get lighter and the color isn't as intense or saturated. Which I really like these examples that I'm showing because they connect to what we did in class, except this is the opposite. But exactly. Okay, and this is just a breakdown of value. So remember we talked about value with light versus dark. And so this is in regard to the lightness. So as we get up closer, not only is it brighter far away, but as we get up closer, we can see more contrast and more detail. Just like in those mountains in the paintings, we can't see as much information. One way I really like to connect to distance and atmospheric perspective too, and perspective in general, is if someone's standing right in front of you, you can read their t-shirt very clearly, no matter what it says. And as they get further away, it's harder to read that t-shirt, and we get less and less information. It's harder to understand. And these pictures are great examples of that, because as you can see here, we can't make out anything out of box number 5. So right here, we have no information. All we know is that it's gray. Here, we can kind of make out those little specks and understand that maybe it's a river or reflection, or it's just very shiny. And so we can make out more information in comparison to number 5 because it's further away. All right, and then here I have 2 examples, one of weaker perspective, one of stronger. And the reason why this would be considered weaker is because we can still see that little sphere right here. We can still see that off in the distance. This one's considered stronger because it's really over-exaggerated atmospheric perspective and things are really getting lighter off in the distance. Then I wanted to show another way that we can create space and depth, even beyond atmospheric perspective too. And this is called middle ground, foreground, and background. I'm sure that you guys have heard of background before. Maybe you've considered what's in the background of the photo you're taking. Maybe you're taking a family photo and someone walks behind you in the background and ruins the photo for you. It's always the worst. So we can connect in that way and understand what a background is. But middle ground and foreground might be new to you. So we can break this down within a painting or within an artwork, and it's showing those overlapping parts in order to create space. Okay, and it's pretty straightforward, but a background is of course everything that is in the back of an artwork. So one thing that I would ask you is, do you think that this tree is in the background? Okay, and if you think that it was, you're actually wrong, and we're going to get to that in just a sec, because it is actually in the foreground. So all the items in the front of our artwork are going to be in the foreground. And one way that we can understand this is not only from detail and contrast and color, but also considering perspective, how close or far things are away from you, and how big or small they appear. So in this painting, you can see there's a tree here on the left, and there's a mountain next to it in the background. In real life, that tree would not be as tall as the mountain. And that's how we can understand that this tree is closer to us. So we can consider all these things that we recognize in the other painting of how far away something is. The same thing, how close something is to you too. And then pretty straightforward, everything that is in the middle ground of our artwork. So then one thing I had the in-person students do was I had them point out and specifically outline the different parts of this painting. So I had them drag their finger across whatever they thought was the background, and this is kind of what we came to the understanding of was the background. This is debatable. Really, you want to focus on all those things I just talked about previously. Are they the same tone? So you can see here these mountains in the background are very tinted in comparison to the ones that I did not outline. So everything above that line I considered and the students considered in the background. And there's some things that you may include, you may not include, but as long as you generally get everything that's furthest away, you will have that right. Okay, and then I did my middle ground, so you can see here, everything that's in the middle of our artwork, which this is also another tricky one with the trees, but we can gauge that those trees are almost as tall as that mountain, so we know that those trees are at least in the middle ground, but more than likely the foreground because they are so tall in comparison to those mountains. Because we know that trees aren't as tall as the mountains that are that big. And then I outlined my foreground, of course. So I included my trees. So like I have outlined in the middle ground, we understand that this is the foreground right here, this is the middle ground, and this is the background, those different sections. So I actually went ahead and broke down my painting. This isn't my painting, Albert Bristott's painting, and I broke it down into 7 different layers. And that's because we are going to be incorporating that into our painting. And so this would be an example of breaking down this painting in 7 layers. And then I also include an example of what this painting would look like if we were breaking it down those simple shapes. So this is actually a sneak peek of what you guys are going to be doing that is due next Wednesday. You guys need to break down the basic shapes of the picture that you turned in for your discussion post. So you guys will probably look something like this. And then I also have an example of a student work too. So this student broke down their painting or their image into 7 different layers. And he hasn't numbered it yet, but he did an excellent job of breaking it down the different layers. And he actually has it numbered on his translucent paper. So this is a great example of breaking down this painting. And although I hate how it looks like a paint by number, but it is such a simple way to break down the basic shapes without being so intimidated by all those details in the artwork or the image. So this is kind of what ours will kind of end up looking like in the end, more likely so. So that gives you the expectation of what you guys are going to be doing next. Thank you.